Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the overall, the parameters under which this OIC moot was held, and again, what sort of decision making has been done so far, and in particular, most of the delegates who visited Pakistan and they were in Islamabad for this very important, extraordinary session of the OIC, they really hailed and appreciated the efforts of Pakistan. I think Pakistan took a great initiative to invite these OIC members along with the P5 group and a couple of others from various financial institutions. And now it seems that a lot of progress will be made. Now, as I earlier also said, that what are the parameters to judge about the overall goals and objectives of this OIC? Have we been able to achieve those? Because as far as the recognition of the Taliban regime is concerned, nobody has talked about it. But I think there are hints. Having said that, what sort of pledges would be made in cash and kind, and how soon will they be able to deliver? Because promises are made, promises should be kept, and they need a constant sort of a support for the coming months and perhaps years ahead. Saudi Arabia was the first to pledge around 1 billion riyal. Probably they'll be pledging more in the coming days. So the cases with certain other countries. A proper account in the Saudi investment bank would be made, and then that account is supposed to be looked after certain members, and then that's how the overall transactions would start. Because currently, as we all know, that the Taliban regime is under sanctions. So financial transactions again is a problem. The banking system has collapsed. It is believed that almost 60% of the total population of Afghanistan, that is around you can say 20 to 22 million people, they are at a verge of starvation. There is an acute shortage of medical facilities, clean drinking water, and I earlier mentioned about the health facilities as well as education. A lot of support is needed. Now, before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
17th Extraordinary Session of the 57-Nation Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which was hosted by Pakistan and chaired by Saudi Arabia on 19 December 2021, reflected Pakistan's abiding commitment and consistent efforts to promote peace and stability in Afghanistan. In this session, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has proposed and presented a 6-point framework to support the Afghan people.
I propose a 6-point framework for the OIC to lead. First, we could create a vehicle within the OIC to channel immediate and sustained humanitarian and financial support to the Afghan people, including from pledges by the OIC member states and other donors. Second, we should agree to increase investment in the people of Afghanistan bilaterally or through the OIC in areas such as education, health, technical and vocational skills to the Afghan youth. Third, a group of experts comprising the OIC, the United Nations and the IFIs be established to consider ways and means to facilitate Afghanistan's access to legitimate banking services and to ease the serious liquidity challenge of the Afghan people. Fourth, we should focus on enhancing food security of the Afghan people. The Islamic Organization for Food Security can and must lead this effort. Fifth, invest in building capacity of Afghan institutions in countering terrorism and combating illicit trade in narcotics. Finally, engage with Afghan authorities to help meet the expectations of the international community, in particular regarding political and social inclusivity, respect for human rights, especially the rights of women and girls, and combating terrorism.
Organization of Islamic Cooperation Secretary General Hussein Brahim Taha and Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths also stressed then called on member countries to join hands and deliver humanitarian assistance through the Organization of Islamic Cooperation mission in Kabul. This extraordinary session was concluded by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi's media conference along with OIC's Secretary General Hussein Brahim Taha, in which he announced the establishment of a humanitarian trust fund and food security program. He also announced that the OIC will appoint body's Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Ambassador Tariq Ali Bakhit, as special envoy for the OIC Secretary General for Afghanistan. He announced that the fund will be managed by Islamic Development Bank and would be made operational by March 2022. It would function in collaboration with other international actors. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation Secretariat, Islamic Development Bank and funds official would moreover negotiate with United Nations bodies for unlocking the financial and banking channels so that aid could be dispersed among the people of Afghanistan. Moreover, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation foreign ministers called for unfreezing of Afghanistan's financial resources by United States for preventing collapse of economic system and revival of economic activity. Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi, speaking at the plenary session, reassured the international community of Taliban's commitment to human rights, women's rights and forming inclusive government as their duty. The Taliban delegation attended the meeting as observer for lacking international recognition, while Afghanistan's seat at the conference remained vacant.
Now to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Farukh Amil Saab. He's the former chair of OIC in Geneva, former ambassador and permanent representative in the United Nations and former ambassador in Japan. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and pleasure to have you for the first time in the show, sir. And we have with us on the telephone Asim Iftikhar Ahmad Saab, the spokesperson of the Foreign Office. Welcome to the show, Asim Iftikhar Ahmad Saab. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Right. So I'll start from you. I mean, we were just listening to the 5-point agenda of the framework that was set by the Foreign Office and our Foreign Minister in particular, and he spoke about a couple of very important points. OIC has finally established a humanitarian trust fund, and we expect that a lot of countries will, in fact, pool into that account, and eventually something will start. So currently, that makes a lot of sense, but the kind of objectives and the goals you had set for this particular extraordinary OIC Moot, how many of them have been achieved, and how would you also tell us about the overall parameters to judge the level of success of this particular gathering, sir?
Well, thank you very much. I think you have made aware the listeners about the background to this conference and its objectives in the introduction that you have provided. So let me make it short and let me come straight to the point. I think this was a conference which was of significant importance. It had basically a single point agenda, that was the looming humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. And as you have been following the international media, there has been a lot of attention on this, but there was no mechanism, no platform, regional or international, from which this crisis was being effectively addressed. So the idea behind this conference was for the OIC to take the lead, to present this as a broader international platform in which all interested countries and international and regional organizations are on the same table, and with the sole objective of trying to address the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. And I think we have been very successful. As you know, this was an extraordinary session. It means that it was organized at a very short notice. We had only a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks to prepare. The response was very encouraging and positive. There were over 70 delegations who participated, among them 20 at foreign ministers level and about 10 at deputy minister or minister of state level. We had participation from the P5, we have the UN and its agencies, we had the international financial institutions, and we had other major countries and stakeholders. We had regional organizations like the Arab League, the ECO, and the Gulf Cooperation Council. So the Islamic Development Bank was there. So you saw that this was a platform that brought many together, and it really provided an opportunity for engagement. This was the second aspect which I think needs to be highlighted, because we brought these countries together with the OIC and the other stakeholders, and the Afghan interim authorities were also there. So this enabled this two-way exchange of views and expectations, because as you see, there are expectations from the international community about what the Afghan interim authorities need to do, and there are expectations from the Afghan authorities. What are their expectations from the international community? So this big platform also provided that opportunity for that engagement and interaction for a better understanding of the ground situation in Afghanistan.
All right. Now, Asif, a couple of other points here. One is about the attendance of so many members. They came, a few countries could not send their representatives also. But what I'm saying is, in general, most important members were present, and especially when you talk about the GCC countries. Saudi Arabia, they took the initiative. Now, sir, do you think these countries can perhaps persuade the American authorities as well to release that fund, which is still with certain European countries and also with the United States of America, that is around $9.5 billion? Do you think that money will be released at some stage?
Well, I think that is a discussion that has already started, and there is a lot of push behind that. Not only from within this conference, there was a lot of members who spoke about that. This aspect, which is a very important aspect, is also reflected very clearly in the outcome document, which is the resolution on Afghanistan. If I can relate to you the language, it talks about exploring realistic pathways towards unfreezing Afghanistan's financial assets. So it's very clearly mentioned. But I think what is more encouraging is the debate that has started within the United States itself. So you saw this letter, the collective letter from 14 former U.S. ambassadors and generals who had direct engagement with the situation in Afghanistan, having served there. And they wrote to the U.S. administration, drawing attention to the grave situation that has established there and the need for providing funding in whatever ways it is possible. And then following up on that, you saw this letter, bipartisan, from the congressmen from both parties. This was on 15th of December. Again, addressed to the Secretary of State and the Treasury Secretary, drawing attention to the situation and making recommendations as to how the U.S. administration could take certain measures to release funds from Afghanistan's own funds, which have been frozen for payment of salaries or for upkeep of schools and school teachers, and for provision of liquidity. So I think there is this important debate that is now taking place itself within the U.S., which is very encouraging.
That's very interesting and very encouraging also, because that's how, bigger decisions would be taken. So two more questions, if you could reply. So one is about the fourth point regarding the framework that was presented. And it said that OIC to launch Afghanistan Food Security Program. So Pakistan perhaps is one country that has been aiding them for a very long time. As a kid, I remember a lot of aid used to come in cash and kind from GCC countries. Even during the time of Eid al-Azha, I remember right after that there would be planes coming in carrying a lot of meat from these Gulf states, and that would be distributed among the people living in Pakistan, the Afghan refugees I'm talking about. The interesting part is that now we have also learnt that perhaps Pakistan might allow, I'm not sure, please kindly confirm this, that the aid coming in from India, do you think, sir, we are kind of rethinking about it also, that should we let it come inside and let it go to Afghanistan?
Well, let me first talk about Afghan food security program, because,
Please.
the shortage of food is one of the major issues confronting the Afghan people. So there was this proposal, and I think it has been addressed by this conference through the establishment of this food security program, which will be entrusted to the Islamic Organization for Food Security. Pakistan itself has been, very active in channeling and providing itself food, medicine, and other assistance to Afghanistan. And the 5 billion rupees assistance package
We'll
that
allocate
we have
against.
announced, which is approximately 30 million US dollars, it will also include a component of 50,000 metric tons of wheat. You mentioned about the assistance that was offered by India. We have made it clear already. I think it has been known for a couple of weeks now that we have already informed them that Pakistan will allow this on an exceptional basis. This is on humanitarian grounds. And recently we have also allowed and informed them that this transportation along the route to Afghanistan can take place by using the Afghan trucks.
All right. So that's again something pretty positive. That's the last very important question, sir, because at the end of the day, the narratives are created, how narratives are formed, whether negative or positive, pro or against. Sir, I had spoken to so many foreign analysts regarding this OIC in my recent transmission during the last week. And interestingly, whether you talk about Germany or you talk about people from Italy or Sweden or France or UK perhaps, sir, any news regarding Afghanistan, the current crisis I'm talking about, there is a blackout. Not even a single channel is talking about it, sir. Don't you think that this is the time, sir, this issue should also be, highlighted the way we are doing it in Pakistan? We had a very long 3-4 day transmission also. But there is not even a single story, sir. Don't you think this needs to be told? And ambassadors all over Islamabad, they should be kept in the loop also, sir, on daily basis, that what exactly we have done and what sort of a progress we have made so far.
I think I would beg to differ a bit from this perception that you have shared. I think, first of all, the ambassadors in Islamabad are fully briefed, and not only the OIC countries but the others. And as you mentioned, some of the names yourself, the P5 and some of the leading donor countries like Germany, Italy, Japan, and also the EU. They were fully informed. They were participating in this conference, and I think all of them greatly appreciated this initiative. But on the issue of wider coverage and projection, what I have been seeing since last night, I think in the regional and international press and media, this conference has received wide coverage. And
Asim sir, not talking about the OIC summit. That got a lot of coverage. What I'm saying is the actual stories, the stories about the misery of the Afghan people, sir, whatever is happening out there, the extreme harsh winter, lack of food,
you're right.
lack of medicine.
You're right. I think there is coverage, but it is not enough. You're right on that aspect. And this is what we have been trying to highlight, that while the UN has reported, while the various agencies of the UN and while individual countries, they have the presence, they know the situation, and while it is in front of us, it's right there. We can see and we can visualize, the misery that is faced by the Afghan people. So it is now the responsibility of the international community. I think the message that has gone out from this conference is that it is not Pakistan's responsibility alone, and it is neither the responsibility solely of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. This is a global, wider international responsibility, and they should shoulder it.
All right. Asim, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, so I really wanted, him to answer a couple of questions because They were just popping up in my mind, sir, since the gentleman was only there for 20-25 minutes. But coming to you now. First of all, sir, when the Prime Minister says that if the timely help isn't given, if the aid isn't provided to the Afghan people, sir, this is going to be the largest man-made disaster. Let's start off from there, sir.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your show. I would say, before I answer that, I would say that Pakistan has seized the moment at this time. And seized the moment, I mean, it's never too early. The Afghans are having their winter of despair. You see how cold it is here in Islamabad. It's even worse in Afghanistan. And Pakistan, through this very important conference, has created a momentum. And I was listening to what you just asked the spokesperson. Yes, about is Afghanistan being reported? It is being reported. I mean, before coming here, there was a piece on Sky, and there was a Western commentator talking about a book about Brahimi and saying that we should have done X, Y, Z. So there is a discussion that is taking place, and as the spokespersons outlined, there is a discussion. But what this conference in particular has done, it's ignited that debate. It's refocused the world's attention on this. And I think the government is absolutely correct. The Prime Minister is correct in saying that this would be man-made because it is deliberate. Now, you can have sanctions against the Taliban. That's a different story. But when you extend those sanctions and you move them to sanctions on everybody, all of Afghanistan, which includes women and children. And so when we talk about who's going to suffer the most, it's a predominantly young population like ours. It's under 30. So the young men and boys and girls and children are going to be the primary victims because they're the weakest ones. So this is a colossal man-made disaster if the international community doesn't help. Of course, Pakistan, by having this OIC conference plus others, it's very important that the P5 were there, the IFIs were there, and because at some point the government here has clearly said that we need to move towards this reiteration of the Afghan problem. Before it was a war, the war is ended. But now you don't punish the entire nation and you don't abandon Afghanistan. And at the same time, if you think about a man-made problem in the terms, in the language of the Prime Minister, collective punishment never works. So if you're going to punish an entire nation, for what? For a particular ideological issue? I've always advocated that somewhere along the line we must meet in the middle, and I think this is what the government and the foreign minister in particular has been doing. This is getting the Taliban towards the center, and Pakistan's role consistently in years gone by has always been talking about a political settlement, but keeping the humanitarian aspect at the center of everything. And if I may just add this, it's something that Pakistan gets a lot of knocks and bangs, and which are I think are really unfair. Since the end of the Second World War, Pakistan has continued to host the largest number of refugees for the longest period of time. And so the critics that step forward and say, well, Pakistan's done this or it hasn't done this, and it's doing, there's a narrative that has been built up against Pakistan. That is absolutely unfair. And so when the Prime Minister and the government is saying this is a man-made disaster, he's absolutely right on this, because we can't allow this to happen. Now, the political process and the re-engagement with the Taliban and their interim government, that's a separate track. But in the meantime, why would you want to punish everybody else there? So, and I think the spokesperson is right. Those ambassadors and generals who served in this
the letters that have been written to the US authorities,
in the Atlantic Journal, and I've seen many articles in Past Blue, the UN Barbara Crosset writing about the Swedish humanitarian mission in Afghanistan. There's a lot that is there, but of course it needs to be there much more. And time is of the essence, and I think by having the Islamic Development Bank as the vehicle to move this entire process forward is also very, very important, because it's a respectable institution. It has money, it has
a lot of credibility, yes,
capacity, and it can do these things. So, of course, everybody's gone home.
So tell us one more thing. I mean, when you talk about that, XYZ amount of funds would be released. There would be certain countries who would be helping, in the form of kind, perhaps wheat or rice or medicine. And, certain countries because they also need cash. Now, do you think this Islamic Development Bank, which has its branch in Islamabad also, if you remember, sir, there was a huge bank, and do you think they have the capacity to work with the private banks present in Afghanistan, sir? Because there is slight mistrust, because this is what I gathered during the last 2 years, that the countries wanted to help, but they never wanted to give their money to the Taliban authorities.
Well, I can answer this in the sense that that there has been a discussion, and there are several discussions taking place, and formulations by those who are withholding the money that belongs to the Afghans to find a way how to reach the humanitarian programs. And I think Filippo Grandi is doing a marvelous job at UNHCR, the WHO, Dr. Tedros. All of these, the UN agency heads have a clear plan where they can address those concerns. That I understand that why would we compensate the people that have defeated us?
Exactly.
There's
a debate going on this.
There is a problem there, but those people need to see past their nose and see, well, these children and women are dying today. They don't have heat, they don't have food. And then the worst thing is that and I'm glad it's here, very much here, about the WHO. If a country cannot even feed itself, and there are plenty of reports that are there, plenty of television programs about the healthcare system system. You can't call it a system anymore. It's in complete shambles. They don't have.
It has totally collapsed.
It's gone. It's
because the NGOs were primarily running it.
Right, but when you think if a country can't feed itself, when you have a virus, and you have Omicron right now, if you have a virus that jumps continents in seconds, do you want to condemn the Afghan people and its neighbors to this virus? And it's not just the coronavirus or the COVID-19 crisis. It is also polio. Does the world want polio to make a resurgence? So the healthcare is, why should that be subject to political considerations or economic considerations? And I think the
food security, health security, I mean, these are the primary
the arguments are being built up, and credible arguments by credible voices in the West. It's not just and the fact is that if it was just the OIC, you could say, well, maybe they're not listening, they may not do anything. The P5 were there, the I5s were there, all the UN agencies were there. And what I'm saying is what the UN agencies have been saying for the past month. They've been saying there's a crisis coming. Kai Ede, who was the SRSG, the Norwegian SRSG, was saying in September, October, he was saying there's a crisis in the making. And the UN Secretary General himself has flagged this. So the world is very much aware of it. And Pakistan's key role in this was as being a neighboring country that has been carrying shouldering the burden of our sisters and brothers in Afghanistan for 42 years, has been to flag that and say, look, the planet cannot have this kind of crisis, because it's not just the refugees that will come across.
Absolutely.
It'll be the viruses, it'll be all kinds of other issues that
I totally agree with you. Now, a couple of points, sir. One is about the flight of capital from Afghanistan, because according to one, there was a story which I read, which said that around $4.5 to $5 billion worth of money normally is in circulation in Afghanistan. And currently only 20 to 25% is available because people, either they have withdrawn and they're keeping it under the mattresses. This was the exact word they used. So flight of capital, sir, or when people flew, perhaps they took the money along or whatever. Second important factor is about the brain drain, sir, because you need technocrats. You need the right person for the right job. I mean, Taliban, perhaps they are great fighters, there's no doubt. But, you know, in order to run an IT company or perhaps, you know, a bank, that is not their domain. So don't you think that there needs to be a cohesion? There need to be people together working. And this kind of a trust deficit, unfortunately, which is there, you know, that should be eliminated.
Right. Well, I'm not going to. I'm not the spokesperson for the Taliban, but certainly it was a rural resistance movement, and they're new to running the government.
This is my point.
And so they will.
And a lot has changed during the last 20 years.
The last 20 years have changed, and there's a whole generation of young women and men who have come of age under a developed, more developed Afghanistan. Now, the issue is that for Pakistan, our national interest is to see a stable and successful and prosperous Afghanistan, and that can only happen when Afghanistan is not being cornered and abandoned, cornered and persecuted And of course, CPEC and BRI are linkages, are energy and trade linkages with the Central Asians, with Iran and to Turkey. All of this is affected by this. So therefore, it is not in anyone's interest to have this. Of course, individuals will, and this is human nature, where, I mean, it has happened before as well, unfortunately, in other parts of the world, where if there's a crisis of confidence in the government, the people, run away. Well, the ones who can run away do.
And they did.
Well, they did. But on the other hand, you see, I was reading a story the other day that the Taliban have reopened the passport offices, and they can anybody who wants to leave.
Queues and queues and queues are there. So
well, okay, there's queues, but there's plenty of people that doesn't mean that if they're leaving that we forget about the rest of them. No. So the point is, there is a crisis of confidence in the banking system if the Afghan money is being withheld. And that is being withheld for whatever reason, ideological reasons or political reasons.
Perhaps political reasons. Now, sir, one important area. We got to know, and we got to know it through our foreign minister, and he said that 90,000 new refugees entered Pakistan. 90,000. And if this was the number given, I'm not saying that these are the ones who just crossed the fence. Perhaps these were the ones who, in fact, left Kabul or other major cities, and either they came in by the planes or even they drove, because Pakistan was very lenient. You remember, whosoever was carrying a slip where they were allowed to enter, they entered. And interestingly, I'm going to give you a very interesting figure. In a place like Islamabad, the rents have almost multiplied, sir. Because I was having a word with somebody who is into real estate and said that the rents have doubled because these are the Afghan refugees who have come to Pakistan waiting to leave for some other foreign country through Pakistan, waiting for the documents, and they wanted the furnished flats, and so they paid in dollars and they live. So I'm just giving you that effect on one city, major city, that is Islamabad. So that tells us the story, sir. So when we talk about this brain drain or the flight of capital, don't you think this is going to be a much larger problem for the current regime? Whether we accept it or we don't, that's a separate chapter. And that is going to be a problem where, lack of human resource to run the system, that won't be there.
Of course, when you lose the support basis of the people, the pillars of a society, the doctors, the engineers, media people, everybody, if they all disappear, then it is a problem. But the thing is, when what you just mentioned about the rents increasing in Islamabad, I just returned from Istanbul, and there's a huge area that is populated by the Syrian refugees. And the Syrians are very much there, and what they've done, they've driven up the rents as well. And
same phenomena.
So it happens everywhere. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It happens. But to answer your question, I think we have to persevere with this process that this conference has started. And the process is that you have to refocus the world's attention, and not just way down the line. Countries have to step forward, and some countries, in the past, I know when we had the Africa program, if we could not pay the money, we would send rice to Niger. We would send in kind, and we've been doing that, of course, with Afghanistan. It's the obvious one, but Pakistan, with its own, cash-strapped or its own economic and social challenges, has always has given a helping hand. This is not to say the Malaysians won't, or the Turks won't, or the Iranians and the Indonesians. I mean, look who the foreign ministers were here of very key big countries, and
20 foreign ministers, 10 deputy foreign ministers,
and countries with big economies. It's because not everybody's equal, of course, but there are countries within the OIC that have big economies, and they have a capacity to help. So if everybody chips in, there's no reason why the Trust Fund and the Islamic Development Bank, which has the capacity to move forward, and of course if there's a rise in voices around in Western capitals that what we should find a mechanism through the United Nations, through the UNHCR, through the WHO to assist the Afghan people, and in their mindset bypass the Taliban interim government. We want to help the Afghan people, and I think the foreign minister and the prime minister have been absolutely crystal clear, and I think people in Pakistan, the entire foreign office has been clear. This is not about just helping the Taliban. This is about helping the Afghan people. And so this is where the starting point is, and now we have to see how this process evolves.
All right. Now, it's another point. I mean, whenever you talk about, a certain regime which is not accepted, Americans, they are making Pakistan the scapegoat in this regard, and they say, well, the blame game is on. They blame our intelligence agencies and we blame theirs. I mean, it's a very open secret now. The interesting aspect is, sir, when you talk about the current situation that is evolving, or rather it has already evolved in Afghanistan, the presence of the non-state actors there, sir, in the form of Daesh or Khorasan chapter of the IS, or perhaps certain other non-state actors including the IMU or Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, then the Chinese have their own very legitimate concern. Do you think when the Taliban have so much happening all around them, and they are the biggest targets, look at the recent wave of violence in Afghanistan, 80% of those targets in fact were on the Taliban people. And what does it say, sir? So can they manage this, or do you believe that certain powers are still there who will support the non-state actors the way they did in Syria or Iraq perhaps, They were called the rebels, and then finally we got to know new words like Daesh or Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, Boko Haram in Africa, certain other Islamic movements in Indonesia. What do you think about it, sir?
Well, the thing is, in a way, you've answered your own question. Of course, nobody would want the non-state actors, and I think the government has been very clear. I'm not the government spokesperson, but I'm watching it from outside. Of course, nobody wants the return of non-state actors and terrorist groups to Afghanistan. Absolutely not. And therefore, that must be in the interest of not just the neighboring countries, it's got to be in the interest of everybody else.
Interest?
It's the interest of everybody else. So just like the COVID-19 the virus and the variants that are going to keep coming until God knows when, but this will also cannot be allowed to become another source of terrorism. And the interim government has been very clear about it. The Pakistan government has been clear about it, and I think everybody who's sane has been clear about it. Now, whether there will always be spoilers. Of course, there will always be spoilers, and you see some of the headlines coming from a neighboring country.
And according to your own perception, who are the spoilers in this case?
Well,
or who could be the potential spoilers?
Well, the potential spoilers are the obvious ones. I mean, the ones who've seen their assets vanish overnight.
India.
Vanish overnight. So they would be the prime suspect. But I don't want to be like the Indian commentators always pointing the accusatory finger without thinking twice against. We should be much more mature and reasonable about it and see, well, and find the evidence there. But of course, the evidence there is already you can read it straight after this show. It says very clear, all the Indian news agencies are saying, oh, nobody committed a penny, it's a bit of a failure, it was just a show. So of course, the way they're doing it, so that obviously, someone has come to spoil your party, and that's obviously what they're doing. So
according to most of the Indian analysts, sir, whether from the military or from other areas, I mean, they believe that the current situation should get worse.
Yeah.
Afghanistan should remain fluid. The situation should be bad, and from bad to worse. And interestingly, that is what suits them.
Well, India would want to come back, and India would like to hurt Pakistan. And why?
And we've also learned that they have started, in fact, interacting with the Taliban regime as well.
Well, India has always wanted to hurt Pakistan in Afghanistan, and Pakistan, across the borders. I mean, it's crystal clear. So I think everybody understands that whole story. But at the same time, would they want to work with the terrorist groups? Would they want to encourage groups that are working against China or groups? But will their new allies in the West want this to happen as well? So it's a very complicated game. Right now, the focus is the humanitarian concern and the concern for the people and the children.
Last two questions, sir. One is about the kind of negotiations the Western world will hold with the Taliban in order to release their funds. So obviously, the position of strength is something everybody wants to have. The Taliban, they were once in a position to, talk with the position of strength, and they could negotiate better. In this case, now they're in dire straits. The Americans perhaps could talk from the position of strength, or perhaps they wanted this to happen this way. Sir, what sort of negotiations and what would be the ingredient of those? Because that is very important, like release XYZ people or go after certain militant organizations, or perhaps show some flexibility in your approach, do not be very harsh with the women. I mean, the kind of impression that has been given as if every Taliban is killing women out there. It's not like that. I mean, for the first time, I was surprised to see that women, they were holding a rally and they were walking and they were being protected by the Taliban. But obviously, the way they look, they've got long hair. I mean, and that impression, T for terrorist, is very much with the Taliban. So that phenomenon, in fact, generated, but the reality was different.
So your question is that what would be the kind of negotiations?
The terms and conditions, perhaps.
Well, they're already many of the major Western actors have been talking to them. Have been talking to the Taliban before August, and they continue to. I mean, I'm only privy to what I read in the newspapers and what I see online, and that is that yes, there are channels, of course, there have been very sane and sensible voices. I mean, I keep going back to the American generals and ambassadors, a whole group of them that wrote that article. That in itself should be, they've rung the bell on this. So of course. I would imagine that there would be discussions taking place, and of course, in a negotiation, they would have the upper hand. But it's still very unfair because the money that has been frozen. It belongs to the Afghan people, and when you talk about sanctions against the Taliban being expanded to all of the population. And that is the point that the Western countries who are they're not holding Afghanistan or the Taliban to ransom, but they're saying well, there may be an element that wants them to crash and burn. Of course, there's going to be an element there. They say, right, okay, it's your show now. Try to run it. We'll see how far you get. And
we'll create as many hurdles and hindrances as possible.
But I think and this is where again the government's important conference that has taken place has turned the page on this. That it's not just Pakistan saying this; it's the OIC and it's major countries saying the same thing. The declaration is crystal clear. There is a mechanism now, the trust fund, through a reputable the Islamic Development Bank, that is moving this process in that direction. So it's got to be about finance, it's got to be about health, and it's got to be about refugees. They're all technical issues which can be on a separate track from the political process.
But these are the steps which you really need to take on immediate basis. Relief, for example, I mean, that is what they need at the moment. And then, obviously, there are steps how to make sure that things are settled. But, sir, one important area, and that is about the capacity building and the long-term infrastructure development and all in Afghanistan, sir. The problem is that whatever money was spent or was not spent, God knows where it did go, but at the end of the day, we hear about a sum which is around $2.2 trillion. So if the Americans can leave $85 billion worth of military assets there, and they are freezing their $9 billion in cash. The point now, sir, that countries like China, don't you think that is a great opportunity for them? To come into Afghanistan now and start off this rebuilding process, generate a lot of jobs, because these people are known as hard workers, sir.
Well, I don't think the Chinese are just going to suddenly just jump in where the Soviets left and the Americans jumped in and then the Chinese are going to. I don't think it's going to play out like that. China would definitely want to be part of an international coalition of humanitarian assistance. I could see China helping Afghanistan rebuild its infrastructure, but being a partner, not being the sole dominant player in such a field. And that is why, and that is the very essence of what the BRI is all about. Of course, Afghanistan's smack bang in the middle of the BRI, and it's the Chinese need it, the Central Asians need it, the Iranians, the Turks, Pakistan, we all need the BRI to be a success. And therefore, I think replacing one dominant player with another dominant player, I don't think.
But obviously the ideology, the reason to be there is very different. I mean,
well,
one was there to invade, the other one is there to actually liberate, actual liberation.
Well, my own slogan has been freedom, human rights, freedom is through the alleviation of poverty.
All right, sir. We're totally out of time now, sir. Right. But anyway, Ambassador Farukh, Amil, sir, was a pleasure having you, sir, and we'll definitely try to engage you more often in the coming weeks and days ahead, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.